Hi everybody, welcome back to the Batlow Planochordon demonstration block. This is our first update since early spring. It's now third week in December 2024 and thought it was time for another update. We have some not great news to share in regard to the demonstration site since our last update, which was in late August, I believe. The trees weren't moving at that stage, but as we got into the warmer weather of spring and there was bud movement, we noticed that some trees in here weren't coming away. And as time went on, it became apparent that we were going to lose around 30 to 40% of the trees in here due to what we suspect is some disease effect. But we're investigating that currently, so we'll say more about that later on when we've got more information. The result of that loss in here is that it's caused a rethink for Jeremy about what he wants to do with the surviving trees in here and those that he has to replant. And so for the majority of the demonstration rows, Jeremy's decided to go down the path that he's employing elsewhere in the property, and that's to twin stem these new trees. On the upside for the demonstration, there is an area within the block that where the mortality was very low. It equates to about 4 rows and roughly 4 trees in each. So we've got about a 16 tree block where the survival's good, and Jeremy has gratefully agreed for us to continue trying to planochordon those trees. As we walk down the row here, you can see the effect of the infection or disease that we suspect has occurred in here in terms of tree losses. There's quite a number of gaps in here now. You can see even trees that had grown quite well last season, we got them close to having cordons down in position, enough length in those cordons, and they just started to move bud, or started to break bud and then just collapsed. And this is what they look like now, a couple of months on. And then we've got some that have survived whatever it was and are growing quite nicely. And you can see these are ones that Jeremy is converting now to a twin stem system. I think there's a plan here to interplant these as well. But as I said, we'll talk to Jeremy more about that on another video and the decision making behind that. But a bit further down here is our area that we're going to retain as the planochordon demo. It's much smaller component of the 4 rows, but it's an opportunity for us to continue what we were trying to do and see if these trees can actually be developed the way we wanted. I've been in here this morning starting to select vertical shoots and remove unwanted shoots, so you can see the trash on the ground, unwanted shoots. And then there's trees like these that have reasonably good distribution of uprights and have selected what we can to start forming up that vertical two-dimensional canopy. Here's a good example of a tree that's doing what we want it to do. We've got verticals in all 8 positions that we've been able to select that are fairly even in growth. I'd have to say that's fairly atypical at the moment in here, to have trees that are doing exactly what we want. More typical is trees like this one, where we've had to remove some fairly advanced shoots and select the remaining weaker shoots from below or the side of the cordon. So you can see there's a little bit of unevenness in a tree like this one, but still we'll persist and we'll learn something from this, despite what's happened with the overall area of the block with the tree losses. So that's it for this December update in the Planochordon demo site. We've had some challenges. We've made some decisions. Some of those which we haven't covered in this video we'll return in a subsequent video and talk about what we've learned about the tree mortalities, but also the decision making for Jeremy around twin stemming much of this block. And so we'll come back to those issues, but for now, thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.